The stages of learning are there's unconscious incompetence, right? I mean, you don't know, you don't know. You know, a child, you don't know. Then there becomes, you try to do something and it doesn't work. Now you're consciously incompetent. You know you don't know now.
Welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Neha Murthy, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews every month. And now for our guest, Chris Coffey is a Master's Certified Coach and Practice Leader, Americas, at Marshall Goldsmith Stakeholder Centered Coaching, member of the Marshall Goldsmith Group, and President at Prism Limited. He has over 25 years of work experience in leadership development. Chris is also the co-author of the publication, The Secrets of Leadership. Welcome, Chris. We are thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure, Chris. So the first question I had for you is, you've had quite an exciting journey so far. Can you tell us your story about how you came to be the president at Prism Limited and how you began the coaching journey?
Sure. One little correction I'll make. You said 25 years of experience. It's actually more than that now. So, I started this, I met Marshall Goldsmith and Frank Wagner, my business partner, in the early 80s. When we were all teaching situational leadership for Paul Hersey at the Center for Leadership Studies. So, and then in 1986, myself and 3 other gentlemen started Prism Limited. Now, one other thing, just this year, we changed the name of the company from Prism Ltd. To Stakeholder Centered Coaching Ltd. Because that's what we're known for now, and that's really what we've been doing for the last 20 years. So for the first, 15 years of my leadership development career, we really did stand-up training for companies. Both myself, Frank Wagner, Marshall Goldsmith, we really went into big companies like GE and American Express, and we taught leadership. And what was interesting, in the late 90s, I was sitting in the back of a room with Marshall Goldsmith and the president of a Fortune 50 company. And we were wrapping up a workshop. And he leans over to Marshall and myself and says, "I really hear great things about the workshop." And we said, "Thank you." And then he asked another question. He said, "Does anybody ever get any better going to these things?" And I looked at Marshall and Marshall looked at me. And Marshall answered, he said, "I don't know. I don't know." And you know what's interesting? No one has ever asked us that. So what it was happening in the United States, companies were really getting into doing leadership training. And they were hiring high-priced consultants, and they were off in resorts and doing all of that. We pioneered 360 feedback reports. Everybody got a feedback report. You worked with them to develop an action plan. And then nobody ever went back and said, what's the return on investment we're getting for spending all this money? And that really was the beginning of coaching for us. And so we started with a company called Agilent Technologies. That was a spinoff from Hewlett-Packard. And they had 24 high potential individuals that they wanted to get a coach for. So we basically stumbled into the business of coaching. I mean, that really is the story. And for the last 20 years, pretty much all I have done, as well as Marshall, around that is we don't do a lot of stand-up training anymore. We really help individuals become more effective leaders through coaching. So that's really been, how it all came. And again, Frank Wagner and I and three other individuals started Prism Limited in 1986, and I just happened to be the president. We all
Wow,
need a title.
that's an interesting journey. I mean, how can one question turn into so much of thought process coming into it, right?
It's interesting. Life is an interesting journey. And when opportunities present themselves, I think everybody gets opportunities. And a couple things can happen. Either you don't see the opportunity, or you're too afraid to challenge the status quo of what you already have. And so a lot of people just don't take those opportunities and take the risk, because there's always a risk. I know what I know now. What if I try this and it doesn't work? So a lot of people get frozen where they are, individually and collectively as a company. One of my favorite expressions is never underestimate the power of the status quo. We can complain about it, but we tend to hold on to it. And I think the thing with stakeholder-centered coaching, and last year we were named the #1 coach development process in the world by Global Gurus. And, as we move along, I can explain a little bit more about how I think that all happened. But it's been a 20-year journey, and we have over 4,000 coaches worldwide. And the gentleman that I have on the phone with me, Brandon, he runs our sales and marketing operation for international. And let me ask Brandon this question. Brandon, do you have any idea how many coaches we have currently in India?
North of 300.
Wow. Okay. So, there we are. So we're worldwide, even in India.
That's nice. It's absolutely interesting to hear about that.
It's been an interesting and exciting journey all the way.
Yes.
All the way.
So also, like, coming down to your profession, you've been like a coach for like 25 plus years now. So I was curious to understand, like, how important is it for a coach to be more of an ally to a coachee to help them find their own solutions?
So you use the word ally. That's an interesting word. Because words have meanings and we all interpret words different ways. Let me tell you how I describe myself as a coach, my quote, little elevator speech. When somebody says to me, what do? I say, I help successful people have a positive change in behavior that's sustainable and that's recognized and acknowledged by others. So there's a lot of verbs in there that describe what it is I do. I think what's important is that the person you're coaching sees you as an ally, that's a good word, as somebody who's going to help them get to where they said they wanted to go. It's not up to the coach to determine where are they going. And I've never been hired or paid by an individual. Our business is really companies hire us to work with people. Now, I think the mistake often that gets made is companies often think about getting somebody a coach. And one of the first questions a coach has to ask himself or herself, is this person coachable? And the first question I think you have to ask yourself is, does this person want to improve at something that I can help them improve with? And if they don't, walk away. One of my advices to coaches when we certify them is, don't take a bad deal. Trying to get an adult to change behavior when they don't think they need to or don't want to is really what I call a fool's errand, because it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable. And so, and we work in a unique way, a lot of us. It's not mandatory, but one of the ways I work and Marshall Goldsmith works and Frank Wagner works and a lot of us is we work with somebody for a year. We don't get paid for a year. if they improve. And improvement is determined by the stakeholders, the people around the person you're coaching. So I, as the coach, have no vote whether this person improved. The person themselves have no vote that matters. Did they improve? It's the people around them. And that's the uniqueness of stakeholder-centered coaching. So I think it's important that they see us as an ally and that we're somebody who wants to help them get to where they said they want to go. Now, the company certainly has to buy off on that. I'll give you an example. If somebody were to say to me, what I really need to do is organize my office and be more organized. Well, number one, that's not my skill. I could have somebody help me organize my office. So the likelihood of me helping somebody else is slim. But after somebody picks a leadership goal that they want to improve, they have to go to their immediate manager and maybe human resources and say, based on the feedback I've gotten, I'm seen as a micromanager, and I want to be seen as somebody who delegates effectively and empowers other people. Is that a good, do you agree that that's a good goal for me? Because what I don't want to have happen is the person picks a goal, I help them get better at it, and at the end of the year, the company says to me, well, why did he pick that goal? That's not what we wanted him to work on. So it's important to be seen as an ally by the coach, but the company is also my customer too. They're the ones paying me.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. The way you said that people around them is the most important thing, right? Like how they behave and how they are along with them is what matters at the end.
Yeah, well, they're the ones that determine, I may think I'm a great collaborator, but if the people around me that work for me and other colleagues that I need to collaborate with see me as a pompous egomaniac who always has to have his own way, my point of view is irrelevant to their perception of what it is I'm doing. And so often it's really the coach's job to hold that mirror up for somebody to see and acknowledge it and say, you know what? I want to be seen differently. Okay. I can help you do that.
Absolutely. It is beautiful how you said the coaches need to hold up the mirror and tell them what is this. And that is when they will realize, right?
That's the role of a coach. That's really the role of a coach. To help somebody pick a good goal, pick the right stakeholders, get the company to buy off that this is the right goal and these are the right stakeholders, get suggestions from the stakeholders, build an action plan, share that action plan with the stakeholders and say, hold me accountable to do these things. That's really, in a nutshell, what stakeholder-centered coaching process is.
Wow, that's beautiful. So the next question I had for you was like you've spoken about creating a lasting and positive change in behavior of leaders. So what according to you are the key steps to measure behavioral change in leaders?
Well, again, when people ask me the question of how is stakeholder-centered coaching different from other coaching methodologies or processes. Now, one of the things I never do is talk negatively about another process. And I just don't think it's appropriate. So my answer to somebody that asked me that question is, I can't speak about other processes and methodologies because I'm not all that familiar with them. All I can tell you is how stakeholder-centered coaching works. And the distinguishing things about stakeholder-centered coaching are two, and only two. One is the active engagement of stakeholders throughout the process. and what we call the mini survey, which is really a short 10-minute or less survey that the stakeholders complete 2 or 3 times a year on a scale of -3 to +3. Has this person improved at the leadership skill that they picked at the beginning and communicated to their stakeholders? So for instance, if I were to pick, I commit to improve my collaboration. About 5 months into the process, a little simple survey goes out to the stakeholders, usually 10 or 12 of them, and it says, 5 months ago, I committed to collaborate more effectively or delegate or take more appropriate risks or whatever the goal is. Since we started this process on a scale of -3 to +3, how would you rate the change? And that's really how we go about measuring other people's perception of the change. Now, what I will, I'll go back 20 years, even less, where what was articulated was these were the soft skills and they weren't really measurable. Well, we don't buy that. It's all of us have an opinion about somebody we work with. We like them, we don't like them, we think they're pompous, we think they're ineffective. It doesn't take long working with somebody before we form a first impression. And so often that first impression sticks with us. So as hard as it may be to change behavior, it's harder to change perception. Once I believe something to be true, I'm looking for everything to reinforce that. If I think you're a micromanager and it's always got to be your way and you don't listen to anybody, that's my belief. And I have examples of you doing it. And then all of a sudden you go to a leadership program and you get some feedback and you come back and you say to your people, I've seen the light. I've had an epiphany. I know I'm a micromanager. I commit to delegate more effectively. How many people do you think really believe you're going to change? Is that a high number or a low number? What do you think?
Somewhere between high and low. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Well, if you know somebody pretty well, think of somebody in your life. And I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law was a smoker. Smoked cigarettes. And I remember talking, and then he quit. And I was talking to his daughter one day. And I said, I understand your father quit smoking. And she said, oh, Uncle Chris, please. I said, oh, come on, have a little faith. She said, I've watched him quit 10 or 15 times. And it never lasts. Talk to me in a year. And you think about it, she was right. Many times he had said he was going to do this and, do different things. And then when you don't see it happen, you kind of get skeptical. So change is simple. It's not easy. We are all creatures of habit. My guess is you get up every morning, you have the same routine, you have your coffee or your tea, or, you do what you do. Something changes in there, it's disturbing. And it's the same thing with any behavior, any habit. You say, I want to do this differently. And then you tell people, well, they've watched you not change and say you would. So it can become difficult to get people to really, and one of the things we say to stakeholders at the very beginning, if you're going to be a stakeholder, you got to be willing to let go of the past and only judge this person's improvement on these 1 or 2 leadership skills from this day forward. Can you do that? So one of the keys for the coach is to get the person you're coaching to understand they have to make the behaviors that they're doing that are different more conspicuous so that people say, wow, that's different. So in a meeting, instead of saying, no, 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 that's not what we're going to do, you start saying something like, that's it. Tell me more about that. I'm open to changing my mind. I mean, think about people you work with. If all of a sudden, I mean, we're good at predicting how people will respond. Would you agree with that, based if we know them? And
Absolutely.
then all of a sudden they change a little, they do something different. We say, well, that's different. Well, I told you I was going to do that. So, so much of what we do, one of our favorite expressions is, it's simple. It's not easy. It's not easy. And change is difficult. And sustaining it is even harder.
Absolutely. I completely agree to that. Like change is like, it's easier said and like, it's really very hard to sustain to it.
Yeah.
And even harder to create a, impact and, like make people understand that you're changing and it's a change that they need to accept it.
Yeah. And you have to, you have to help other people see what you're doing. So often we will change, but we don't let anybody know. Well, everybody's looking for what they're used to you doing. So that's a big part of the coaching. How do you make it conspicuous? How do you get people to see they've given you suggestions, you've built an action plan, you've shared it with them. Now you got to make sure that they recognize and acknowledge the effort and the changes that you're making. It's not complicated. It's not complicated. It's not easy though. We're all creatures of habit.
Exactly. It all lines down to, as you said, perception is like you can create a perception and it's difficult to change that. And, rather than changing the behavior. So when you have a perception, they think that, okay, this person is like this. And the change is obviously going to be a difficult task to, accept that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for a coach, one of the things I think that make our coaches unique is the strong stakeholder-centered coaching process that we teach people. So 4,000 coaches around the world are pretty much using one process: the active engagement of stakeholders and the use of mini surveys to measure results. Nobody else really does that I know of. And then what's the subject matter expertise that a coach brings to an engagement? And so that's part of your resume to say, I've taught this, and this. I know conflict management, decision-making, argumentation. What are the skills that you bring that you can teach somebody to do? So they're the two things a good coach brings to an engagement.
Wow, that's insightful. Thank you so much for that, Chris.
You're welcome.
So the next question I had for you is like, there is a gap between having knowledge about something and applying it to, the real life and, putting it to action. And in result to get a measurable results, right? Productive result. So how, according to you, companies overcome this disconnect between the knowledge and action to improve the performance and produce measurable results?
Well, again, I think it's pretty much everything I've said up till now. It's really, you can teach powerful leadership classes. And I think the mistake that we've made, and I'm going to just talk about the United States primarily, because the United States is probably far ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, we've been doing leadership training and 360 feedback reports for 40 years. A lot of other countries are, this is relatively new. So, different companies and countries are at a different readiness level to do this. So I think the mistake that the United States made was thinking that if you put people in a class and you teach them something, they're going to go out and do it. And most companies never gave those individuals, even if the person coming out of that class wanted to do it, they really didn't have any help doing it. And that's where coaching has taken it from the classroom to now helping somebody implement it. And I'll use an example. I'm a golfer. I play golf. I can take a lesson, but then I have to go and I have to work on what it is I was just taught in a 30-minute lesson. And if I don't do it right away, if I wait a day or two or three, most of that knowledge is gone. And as Peter Drucker, the great management philosopher, said, if you don't practice a new skill within 24 hours, 50% of it's gone. So part of the coaching is how do you, in a linear, progressive fashion, get somebody to say, you start layering different skills on top. And so I think that's the big gap between knowing and doing. I taught at UCLA, and I would have, college professor buddies, would say something. And one of my favorite things with the professors was to say, this place is full of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge in this place. Does any wisdom come out of it, though? There's a difference between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. You can know the Bhagavad Gita intellectually. Do you live it? That's the doing part. So, and there's that knowing and doing gap. And I think companies, the easy thing to focus on is putting on a class, teaching somebody something, and then checking the box and saying, well, we put 200 people through this leadership class. My question is, so what? How do you know it's made any difference? How do you measure it? And the only way I think you can measure it is if you're teaching leadership and behavior, you have to ask the people around you, is this person doing these things? Yes or no?
Absolutely. There must be a right balance between knowing things and doing, and that's when you can actually put it into action and get productive results out of it, or else it's of no use knowing things, right?
Well, yes, you're absolutely correct. So if you think of the stages of learning, the stages of learning are, there's unconscious incompetence, right? You don't know, you don't know. A child, you don't know. Then there becomes, you try to do something and it doesn't work. Now you're consciously incompetent. You know you don't know now. So if you want to get better at something, you say, okay, how do I get some instruction? Do I read a book? Do I take a class? What do I do? Do I get a tutor? What do I do? And so now you get some knowledge. And like I can think of my golf game where I consciously have to think of things. So the next stage in learning is becoming consciously competent, where I have to think about what I'm going to do. And then, of course, the final stage is the unconscious competence, right? You don't think about when you get in the car how to drive the car, right? Just get in and you go where you're going. You don't think about, how do I tie my shoe? When you're first learning how to tie your shoe, you got to think about what somebody showed you. But after you've done it whatever number of times, you just tie your shoe. You don't even think about it. So how do you get to really being consciously competent and then getting it to where it's just part of your DNA? It's how you do things. And that takes time.
Absolutely. That is very insightful. And it's interesting to know more about those 4 stages of learning that you said.
No, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much for that, Chris. So before wrapping up the interview, I would love to ask you any sound bites that you would like to give our audience for.
I would just say to anybody that's a coach, don't take a bad deal. I mean, I said that before. You know, if somebody doesn't want to do it, you're wasting your time and their time and everything else, and it's frustrating. So, as a teacher, and I think of myself as a teacher. I don't get into I'm an executive coach. I mean, that's all fine for resumes. The bottom line is I'm a teacher. It's what I love to do. I like to help people get better at something. And one of the things I tell people is don't take a bad deal. If somebody doesn't want to do it, you're wasting your time and life's too short to be frustrated. So that's that. For CEOs and people in companies, I don't know exactly where India is in terms of the culture of how important is leadership and coaching, and what do they really are they really interested in creating a coaching culture? And I would say if they are, uh, you know, I, how do you go about engaging or maybe teaching this process inside your company? You know, we could come in and we can either do uh, uh, we train people inside. Now with COVID and everything else, nobody's going anywhere, but that's one way. Another way is doing it online. And another way is also self-paced, where, really using the technology today to intellectually learn the process. And then you have a coaching engagement right away with somebody who shadows you and helps you get better at it. So if a company were really serious about developing talent, really developing talent, then, they really have to think. Workshops don't do it. They just don't. And, I work in a lot of big companies in America that spend a tremendous amount of money teaching people classes without taking some of that money and really saying, how do we get 3 or 4 really key leaders in this company to really be people who develop talent, and teaching them how to do this process, with an experienced coach who can guide them along. And you use that coach as long as you need to embed it into the company. And that's something that, when you put this out, if anybody would want to talk to anybody about that, I would have them, give Brandon a call. And, do we have your email and all that stuff? I mean, Brandon can let you know, because we have, what do you say, about 300 coaches in India. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who thinks I have anything to say, to talk about it, Brandon and myself, and get people to really think about it, because people are thinking about it. I don't think they're doing enough to really do it.
Absolutely. That's correct.
You
Thank
know,
you.
so
Thank you so much for that, Chris. I personally enjoyed talking to you, and it was a learning experience for me altogether.
I'm happy. Me too.
And I'm sure it's going to be the same for our audience as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time with us. Hope to stay in touch with you and stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's completely our pleasure as well.
All righty. Good night.